I got an email just a little while ago. A fan of mine spoke to Ben Shapiro at UW-Madison. Apparently, you know, because the only people that conservative demagogues will talk to these days are like college students with no preparation or whatever. Like that's the limit of their willingness to engage with opposing viewpoints.
Now, for those of you who don't know, the bridge troll that was just on screen was a YouTuber and Twitch streamer who goes by the handle Vaush. He's from California. He is a purported libertarian socialist, a far left winger that still somehow bends over backwards for Biden. And in this video, he's attempting to review a little sort of debate between one of his followers and the conservative commentator Ben Shapiro. And in this video, we're going to be getting into his analysis of their interaction, and I, Red Channels, will be critiquing his critique and exposing him for the soy-filled leftist shill that he is. Now let's dive right in.
Hello, Ben. There was a time where the word mother exclusively described a woman in relation to her biological offspring, but our definition has since shifted to account for adoption, leaving us with a more social and less biological outlook on motherhood. My question for you is how affirming transgender identity is such a threat to biology when we have clear precedent for similar shifts in language?
Okay. Opening bit, 10 out of 10 flawless. That was perfect right there. Excellent question. It's one that I've never seen a conservative answer properly. You delivered it quickly and succinctly. You didn't stammer. Great, great.
Except it wasn't. Now, Ben Shapiro is on the right side here, technically, so I am agreeing with Ben. He's disagreeing with this transgender individual and the arguments that this person and also Vaush are making. But Ben Shapiro does not make the strongest argument against what this person is proposing. And also, what this person proposed wasn't even good. That wasn't a 10 out of 10 opening. That was very verbose and also not even true. Our outlook on motherhood is not now significantly more social than it is biological. 99.9% of the time, when you say mother, people still assume the woman actually gave birth to the kid. But this is only the beginning of the idiotic linguistic games these leftists will play throughout the entirety of this video. Let's watch.
Okay, so usually there is a distinction. You can call somebody mother, but then an adoptive mother is not going to be insulted when you say biological mother. Right? An adopted mother is not going to say...
But they're still a mother. See, this is what they never answer. They're still a mother. Which indicates that the term mother is not purely biological. So if we're willing to make that acknowledgement, is there not perhaps some other acknowledgement we might make vis-a-vis the relationship between a social and biological construct? Who the fuck says biological mother casually? Yeah, the key difference here is that sometimes with adoptive parents, one might say, oh, I'm their mother, their biological mother is X. But what people don't say is, oh, I'm their adoptive mother, their real mother is X. People don't say that, because that would imply that an adoptive mother is not a real mother, when they are.
People actually do say that, but it's considered offensive. Anyway.
What they're not is a biological mother, and people acknowledge this, usually, but they're still a mother.
The biological mother is an inappropriate term. The trans movement claims that the term biological female is somehow offensive. The trans...
Dodging the question, by the way, the question that she asked was about the acceptance of terminology shifting with regards to the biological nature of motherhood, not whether or not trans people are offended by the term biological woman.
This is why both Vaush and Ben Shapiro are terrible debaters, because they've transformed this into some sort of semantic, linguistic disagreement instead of just addressing the issue at hand, which is the legitimacy or illegitimacy of the so-called trans identity. Speaking quickly and splitting hairs does not make you smart, and it is astounding that millions of people have yet to understand this.
Movement will claim that female encompasses not biology somehow. It's a bizarrely illogical categorization. So the trans movement is not a threat to biology. Biology is biology. People will continue to reproduce. I mean, some of us. But in any case, no implication made. But in any case, some people will continue to reproduce. Those reproductive relationships will be almost entirely male-female. The only exceptions would be in vitro or artificial insemination, which will be extraordinarily tough.
Notice again how he's completely dodged the question here. This is one of the reasons why I don't usually think there's that much value in confronting people in environments like this, unless you have like the kind of question designed to make them fluster and bluster. Because he has the microphone, of course. You can't talk over him. The mic can be taken from you, whereas he can just ramble on and on about some other adjacent question.
And here you have Vaush's debate strategy laid bare. It's not about letting Ben get to the rest of his point. Vaush just accuses him of dodging the question, which at this point is already long forgotten because Vaush is stopped in the middle of Ben answering this question so many times, and Vaush just says it's all about power. It's all about appearing like you're right. The whole goal of debate for Vaush, his whole modus operandi, is just to catch people off guard and make them look as bad as possible in front of as many people as possible. He does not and has never cared about the truth of political issues.
Tiny percentage of actual inseminations and pregnancies. So biology is not threatened. Truth is threatened. I'm not worried about biology being threatened. If you want to threaten your own biology, I mean, that's your prerogative. But truth, the idea that male refers to a biological category as opposed to an idea that you have in your head that is unverifiable by any sort of objective reality, that is something that nobody who cares about truth should acquiesce to.
And yet, through the social process of adoption, which is not biological and therefore not tied to direct genetic lineage, we can call a person a mother even if they share no direct biological relationship with an adopted child. So the term mother, which does carry biological implications, has a non-biological meaning.
The entire way that we communicate is through words that have mutually agreed upon definitions. And the definition of a word cannot be
Vaush, are there any arguments that can be honestly made by the right that cannot be countered by the left? No. We are always right, and they are, at least in their disagreements with us, always wrong. The reason for this is because fundamentally, right now, the dichotomy between right and left framing of issues is one of framework. And the framework the right uses when engaging with these issues is fundamentally broken.
Do you see how much of a lunatic and a partisan this man is? The right is wrong on literally every issue, according to Vaush. The norms and standards and the understanding of human sexuality that humanity has had in the Western world for over 2,000 years is all wrong because of a framing issue, according to Vaush. Do you see how ridiculous that is? How absurd it is? To understand why he would say something so ridiculous, we have to understand Vaush's self-image a little bit better. He's utterly convinced of the power of his own argumentation. He sees himself as a sort of god of debate, the greatest rhetorician ever, a god of rationality. So even though he's a complete shill, he's totally convinced that he's right. And he probably is a paid shill, literally. He's supposed to be like some sort of radical left-wing libertarian socialist, but again, as I said earlier, worships Biden like a god. If you had an internet personality who is an asset for the feds, it would probably be Vaush. But I will have you know this, he is utterly convinced of what he says. Unshakably, absolutely, wholly and totally convinced of about 90+% of the stuff that comes out of his mouth. And really, it's because as soon as he says something, he thinks he's right. He's literally in love with the sound of his own voice, to the point that he thinks anything that comes out of his mouth must be true, which is why he has no problem contradicting himself or making these absurd arguments that have nothing to do with the issue at hand. And unfortunately, the way people think and argue these days, even people on the right, sane people, conservative people, reactionary people, they still get bogged down in this.
Ouroboros that eats itself. It can't be a woman is anyone who says they are a woman, which is a woman. It's completely circular. That has no definition. If you want to define a category, the category has to have definition. And any attempt to broaden that category out to include things that are clearly not in that category, and in fact...
Like mother? See, look, at this point, not only is he not answering the question, he's going on to directly do the thing that, what's it, doom and gloom? Demi-gloom, not doom and gloom. Demi-gloom, addressed in her opener.
There are only two categories, male and female. They're actually in the other category. That is a fundamental assault on the truth, and nobody should accept that.
And the people begin to clap over that because it's logical. This is why Ben Shapiro's method of argumentation is ultimately ineffective. Because he's going, oh, you made a circular argument. When what's going on here is you have a person who wants to legitimize men chopping their own balls off and calling themselves women and being recognized as women. That a man who chops his own balls off is functionally indistinguishable from a woman. That's what this person's arguing for. That these are basically the same thing, and that a man who puts on a dress, wears a wig, puts on makeup, is as effective a mother to a child as is a biological woman who happened not to birth that child. That is the insanity which this person is trying to promote, which Ben should have addressed in much clearer terms here.
So, like, this is like NPC talking points from him, right? Like, he was asked a pointed question. He does the same rambling as always, which is truth is under attack by the concept that a woman could mean anything other than a biological female.
Conservatives and right-leaning people will correctly point out, you're undermining the definition when you do this. You're undermining truth. And then Vaush just says, oh, that's NPC rhetoric. Huh. But what does mother mean if it's not contingent on any biological truth whatsoever? Which is what Vaush is implying. What could it possibly even refer to? Female parenting? But femaleness isn't contingent on biology either, according to Vaush.
Which, again, he's doing the thing that was the point that was made here. Here are some easy questions, okay? Is an adoptive mother a mother? And then he might say, well, they're not a biological mother. I didn't ask if they're a biological mother. I asked if they're a mother. Could an adoptive mother be asked, oh, are you that child's mom? And say yes. To which he would have to say yes, because everyone agrees on this. Legally and socially, everyone accepts the fact that adoptive parents are indeed parents. If he bit the bullet and said no, then he's opening himself up to a bunch of attacks there. But assuming he said yes.
This is all so pointless and so tiresome. It is mystifying to me how people still actually follow this man. How there are millions of people who look up to him. You know, I know 2 Vaush fans in real life, and I guess they just don't have their little bubble shattered by people like me. I didn't poke and prod them on these issues because I knew they would just have a meltdown. So I kind of like minced my words and just went along to get along. You know, I just had to deal with them as much as I would deal with them, and then I just went about my day. I didn't have any sort of extended interaction with them. Because the only way you can sincerely, unironically think this way is if you're a loser who's totally insulated from reality. And to respond to what Vaush's drivel is here, I will basically go there. The verb to mother is another way of saying to birth. That's what it originally meant. And as a way of treating someone, it describes the way that creatures that give birth to offspring treat those offspring by being nurturing and caring and affectionate. So ultimately, it does refer back to that biological relationship. The reason society is comfortable calling women who take care of children mothers who aren't actually their biological parent is because they can reliably fulfill that role. The reason why we're not comfortable expanding the definition is because a man in a wig cannot properly fulfill this role. He can only ever treat a child as a man in a wig impersonating a woman.
Here's another question. By what metric, then, does a person become an adoptive mother? So you could argue, oh, it's by the state, like you can legally adopt someone. Okay, what happened if there was an apocalypse? The state dissolved and we're all, fending for ourselves out there. There's no longer any legal entity to grant the status of adoption. But you, a woman, find a child who's like 2 years old and you raise them from that age up to an adult and you spend your entire life operating in the role of a mother to that child. Are you their mother, even though you have no biological connection and there's no legal entity to officially grant you, the adoptive title? Can a person only be an adoptive parent in a context where the state allows them to?
Literally, who even cares? This is the level of semantics, the level of hair splitting, the level of sidetracking that he reverts to make his arguments. And what's worse about this is he sincerely believes that this is like a good method of argumentation. He honestly believes he's like cutting to the heart of the issue here by saying this stuff. It's just ridiculous.
Now, I don't know what exactly he would say to this, But what I do know is that no conservative that I've ever talked to has come even close to addressing these questions. Not only do they not have an answer, they can't even reach this point. They usually deflect or go to a different topic or run away from it, or they answer a separate question, or they get flustered and don't engage. I have never seen a direct engagement with these questions.
And here is where you will receive a healthy heaping of Vaush's posturing. Because he can't be honest, he can't represent his opponents honestly. He just has to say, oh, I've never heard a conservative answer this. You can even see this cope represented in the thumbnail of this video. Ben gets owned. That's really not what happened here at all. This gawky, unconfident man who wanted to cut his balls off and be perceived as a woman challenged Ben Shapiro, and then Ben Shapiro made a decent but albeit very autistic argument against him.
I don't think there is an engagement that could make them look good.
In one of your more infamous debates, you said, I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Yes.
My argument is not that terms like biological female or biological male are necessarily
Like your hoodie, by the way.
offensive. My argument is that you are saying that referring to a trans woman as a woman or a trans man as a man or et cetera, is like inherently offensive or threatens biology. And I'm curious why it's so threatened when there's clear precedent for changing the language.
Again.
Okay, so he's not going to answer this, obviously. I have to say, in terms of delivery, I feel like you're doing a lot better than you probably gave yourself credit for. You're very obviously nervous. If you were a perfect rhetorician...
Like Vaush, who is, of course, the ultimate rhetorician, the only rhetorician to have ever existed,
then you would project confidence in your posture and your speech. However, despite being very nervous, you're not stuttering. Like, you're actually speaking really clearly, and that's very impressive. Most people, when nervous, essentially lock up and can barely speak. Back when I was less proficient at public speaking, I would do that too. That's like a normal response to anxiety in that situation. You're projecting a nervousness, but it's not affecting the delivery of your message, which is impressive, and you should be proud of that.
Participation trophy. You can't recognize that someone is projecting nervousness and then say that doesn't affect the delivery of their message. That is inherently intertwined with their delivery of their message. They're delivering a nervous message. Come on. Endless cope. Anytime you encounter some blue pillar on the internet disagreeing with you, just know they are cocooned in cope.
The term mother does not include father. Every category has to have boundaries.
Not answering
the boundary
question.
Of female starts at male. And when you start including male in the category of female, you are threatening biological definitions as well as basic truth.
Well, you could say the category of mother.
Also, what he's saying is taxonomically nonsensical. The boundary of male is at the end of female. What does that even mean? Are you saying everything in the universe that is not a male is a female? Like, what do you mean? Everything in the universe that is not a female is a male? That doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, he could be saying that there are only two categories, which is of course what he's trying to say. But the way he's trying to say it in this like edgy smart boy, like I through facts and logic, I will taxonomically lay out the definitions of it. It doesn't make any sense.
This is the pot calling the kettle black. Vaush is facts and logic for the left. Literally, that's all he is. He has the exact same rhetoric, the exact same sort of argumentation style, and listening to a debate between Vaush and Ben Shapiro would be the most annoying thing you've ever heard in your entire life.
Starts at conception or, a biological relation to an offspring. But as we know,
but again, the idea that the idea of motherhood being the act of mothering, right? And that is a female. A female does the act of mothering. You can say that a female who does the act of mothering is a mother, but you also have a special category called biological motherhood. I'm not going to say that an adoptive mom and a biological mom have precisely the same definition. They don't.
Nobody said they do, but they're both mothers. And since an adoptive mom can be a mom, that means being a mom is not a purely biological. Notice that what he just said, by the way, is an acknowledgement that trans women could be like he did just admit, even though he can't grapple with it, that there are extra biological categories to these terms. There are exceptions that can be carved out. But again, like he can't engage with it.
This is literally the crux, the entirety of Vaush's argument. Because we have adoptive moms, because we have women who take care of kids who aren't biologically their own, and we call these women mothers, then that means we should call a man who cuts his balls off and wears a wig and adopts a kid or something a mother. As though that's remotely even the same thing. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And to illustrate my point, here's this counterfactual. If I got incurable erectile dysfunction, I'd be a man whose junk stopped working. If my girlfriend's sister decided she wanted to transition, went on testosterone, got a double mastectomy and a phalloplasty, she'd be a hairy woman with skin from her arm grafted over top of her vagina. She will never actually be a man. She could only ever be a woman imitating a man in that instance. And thank God my girlfriend's sister has no interest in doing that.
And don't get me wrong, by the way, when I say this, I don't think if I was there, I could get him to acknowledge this. At most, what you could do is interrupt more frequently, project confidence, come across as casually, disaffectedly amused by his inability to understand your question.
That is literally the best Vaush has got. It's just posturing. It's just acting like you're above it. Just granting your opponent no legitimacy, not even listening to anything they have to say, and just acting like, oh, they just don't understand your argument at all. That's literally, it's just pure cope. Behind the mask is just pure cope. That's all at the core of Vaush.
What you want to do is fluster him. And the best way to fluster a person who's standing at a microphone behind a podium is to project to them that you're the one in control, even though they have all these signifiers of power. Look at him up there, behind the podium, on stage, 2 microphones, banners behind him. He should be in charge. And he is, of course, in technical terms, right? He can order your microphone taken away. He is in charge. But you can project enough confidence to fluster. And in flustering people, you open up opportunities to repeat your questions, to be incisive and direct. Now, I want to be clear, even the best rhetorician alive, I mean, even like some hypothetical god of speaking, would struggle to produce the best possible outcomes in an environment like this.
The god of debate admits he has limitations.
Underneath a subset of category called motherhood. That motherhood sometimes involves birth, sometimes it does not, but it's...
Sometimes the term mother is biologically determinative, and sometimes it isn't. I wonder if well, so you're just opening up the definition of motherhood then, huh? I thought the truth couldn't survive having definitions include things which clearly are not a part of the definition, but now you're saying... Like, again, he's lost this argument. Anyone smart enough to see it knows this.
Could, I don't know, a wombat be my mother if we're just opening it up here?
Certainly involves being a female.
What do you think about the distinction between cis women and trans women?
Explain.
Well, you're saying that a more inclusive usage of the word mother isn't particularly offensive because we also have biological mother.
Yes.
We've offered the
perfect. In terms of how you're doing this, delivery is the key. In terms of the messaging here, you are on point. In terms of how to project the messaging, the confidence in this case is key because the crowd is laughing at the difference in your projected assertiveness. He's up there being calm and calculated and rational, and you're there, a student, you're nervous, you're leaning into the microphone. That the laughing, the tittering is because they anticipate his epic ownage of you, right? The destruction of you. What keeps them from laughing is the fear that you might get him. So this is how confidence compounds, and the lack of confidence compounds as well. The more they titter, the harder it is to get your points out. The more the audience appears to be on his side, the less charity people will afford to your points.
Vaush has a decent understanding of the mechanics of crowds. And Ben's response was wrong here. It shouldn't have been, what do you mean? It should have been, there are no trans women, only men who wear wigs who want to cut their balls off.
Term cis woman, and even biological woman or assigned female at birth. We've offered a variety of terms that properly categorize people.
Again, you cannot extend the term woman to apply to a biological male. Every category has an endpoint. If there are only 2 categories, male and female.
Again, this is taxonomically nonsensical. This doesn't make any sense. You can expand the definition of mother to include non-biological mothers, but you can't exclude the definition of woman to include non-biological women. It doesn't make any sense. He's essentially saying, "Nuh-uh, this is different."
And here again, we see this apples to oranges comparison. Vaush is conflating biological females who take care of children with biological males who want to be called mothers.
And you say that female now is in this category. There are no definitions. There are no definitions. I mean, to paraphrase my friend Matt Walsh, I'm going to need you to explain what a woman is without reference to the word woman.
Wow, crazy. He's completely failed to answer the question and has dodged it every time, and now he's going to ask you what you think a woman is. Wow, this is why Ben Shapiro has stopped doing regular debates and is limiting his negative engagements to college circuits, okay? This is exactly why.
It's really not. You'll notice this healthy heaping of defamation along with everything Vaush says, this just nonsense that he spews from his mouth, this ridiculous narrative. Oh, this is why Ben Shapiro is only doing college circuits now. I don't even know any academics who are like popular who will defend Vaush's understanding of sex and gender publicly like this. This is really a narrative which is being acknowledged by online figures like Vaush, and then indirectly by media, academia, and government officials. Really sort of tacitly, trying to sort of slip it by us without actually having a conversation, because they know the actual average person would find it absurd, would categorically disagree with everything Vaush has to say, with his entire platform.
We can go on all day like this, but...
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily circular to say that a woman is someone who...
So at this point, and this compounds with time, at this point, the only response that you can make that will have any kind of positive outcome is to say, you failed to answer my question multiple times now. Why do you keep dodging it? There are a bunch of ways you could handle that, but past a point, the audience will begin to see you more and more as like a fiddly little technicalities deliverer. You know, somebody with, oh, but what about this? What about this? You're not, of course. You're not that. But you have to present yourself as a threat, because that puts him in a position where he feels he has to respond to what you've said.
Oh, but you are a fiddly little technicalities deliverer, and that's all you'll ever teach your followers to be.
Because at that point, if you accuse him of just flat out ignoring your question, he can either say, well, all right, what is it again? Or like, no, I haven't, or what, but like he has to engage with it or flee, you know?
Exhibits womanhood.
Yes, it is.
And that
is definitionally circular.
Well,
and yeah, don't answer the question, what is a woman? They never care what your answer is. They will never engage with it. It is a complete waste of time. They might as well be asking you to like count out the digits of pi. Like, oh, well, if you're so smart, then why don't you get 100 digits of pi? And you're like, okay. Like, there's no point in doing it. It's always to waste your time, and nothing you say will change the content of the conversation. Unless you get one of the digits of pi wrong, or in this case, say anything even slightly rhetorically ineffective, in which case he'll jump on it.
Vaush recommends not to answer this question because ultimately the left does not have an answer to the question. They can't answer it because, again, the definition of what a woman is necessarily refers back to biological processes. Just because there are some women who have certain medical conditions which prevent them from doing this doesn't destroy the definition entirely. And what's even worse about his advice is, like, what if the conversation isn't even structured in this way, and a conservative person gets the chance to ask you this question first, before you can even go, no, that's answering a question with another question. You answer my question first. Haha, gotcha. Vaush is incapable of giving good advice.
That's like saying a hand is something that fundamentally shows handhood.
Well, what I have
a
to
tree
say
is something that demonstrates the qualities of treehood. What?
I mean, if you get down to the very basics of like linguistic theory, past a point that kind of is the bed. Yeah, categories are made by us. We make categories. I mean, that's taxonomy. Yeah, trees demonstrate the categories of trees, and we determine the categories of trees, but they're not exactly consistent. You know? Yeah. Okay. This is getting like, it's like doctoral shit past a point. But like, this is why you shouldn't even engage with it. You think a Hard like this is going to like engage with linguistic theory, you know?
And there you have it. This moron thinks you need a PhD to understand basic facts about reality. Like linguistic theory is relevant at all here. The utility of a category is the degree to which it confirms to observable reality. That's why conservatives and people on the right fundamentally reject the maxim that trans women are women. Because a man who wears a wig and cuts his balls off is not a woman. It's a man who wears a wig and has cut his balls off.
What new actual definitional content have you added to the word?
I can define womanhood for you, which is a set of characteristics associated with females, and a woman as someone who exhibits said womanhood.
Okay.
So what you're saying here isn't incorrect, and it's defensible with a bit of fleshing out, but you shouldn't even say it because it is you're listing the digits of pi.
Okay, well, you have just used the word female and woman to define each other. So you say a woman is a female, but not a biological female. A female is a woman, and a woman is a female. But at no point have you added any new content.
No, I said a woman is someone who exhibits.
This is another one of those fake smart guy gotchas where they're like, your definition includes the word you're defining. Define a chair. You can watch the whole goddamn Vsauce video if you want to, but yeah, it's not a real argument. Definitions are not objective, they're not concrete, there aren't rules, they're just what we generally agree upon. They're a social construct.
They are social constructs which refer to a physical reality.
Womanhood, and womanhood is a set of characteristics.
Yes, and that doesn't mean anything.
How does it not mean
the reason
anything?
it doesn't mean, okay, again, a dog is a thing that exhibits the characteristics of doghood. It's
I mean, yeah.
a set of characteristics characterized by being a dog. I've added no content to that. If you have no idea what a dog is, you still have no idea what a dog is.
There are plenty of labels that refer to concepts. This is not a new thing.
It's not a label referring to a concept. It's a label that's referring to the same word as the concept. You can't do that. That's fundamentally circular.
Define a chair. Yeah. So I will say, an environment like this kind of necessitates aggression to an extent, very like controlled aggression. However, you aren't aggressive. And in spite of that, I actually think you've come across quite well here. You projected your voice clearly. You never backed down. You never seemed sort of like cowed or intimidated by his line of questioning. I think you actually did quite well here. You were very down in your email. I don't think it was warranted at all.
Okay, now here we'll do a little psychological profiling of Vaush. I know it's a bit late in the video. Hopefully you're still hanging on there. So Vaush is very closed to new experiences. This is why he's content to live in his own filth. He's deeply unconscientious because, again, he's living in filth to begin with. He's not some man off in a cottage somewhere that's perfectly ordered. He's living in a mess, a gross mess with his gross ogre girlfriend. He's probably more extroverted than he is introverted, but ultimately, he is incredibly disagreeable. He has this nerd, contrarian personality type. If you flipped like one or two things about him, he'd probably be a Wignat. He'd probably be some Spurg that you see online, some 1488er, repeating the most glowy talking points, and entirely unwittingly as well, because he thinks he's being the purest form of right wing in that hypothetical.
I'm saying that womanhood...
You have not defined even womanhood. You said a set of characteristics that applies to females, and then you're applying it to males. So clearly this is nonsensical. I'm sorry that it doesn't... I'm sorry that your attempts to worm a definition into nonsense are not succeeding, but like, I can't make that fit into logic because it doesn't. I mean, I'm sorry.
And this is, of course, why aggression is necessary. You know, you're playing chess with a pigeon. The only way to win against a pigeon in a game of chess is to... flip the table before it does and flip it in its direction so it gets sort of hit with a bunch of chess pieces and it hurts a little bit. Yeah, shit harder than it. Yeah, shit on the table harder than they do. What do you think would happen if you responded with adult human female when he asked? Don't. I just don't. Seriously, I've done this so many times. Whenever asked, what is a woman? All you have to say is, hey, we'll get to that, but you didn't answer my question. I don't appreciate you running away from it. And then if they're like, oh, you can't even answer woman, then you can just say like, hey, you can't even answer a question. I thought I was the one asking you questions. You're the one on stage. You want to switch places? Then you can ask me. Like and of course, this requires confidence, being quick-witted, because you're trying to reverse the power dynamic, make it seem like they're the one who needs to be, careful about how they speak. They're the one who has to be on off footing. All that being said, again, this is mostly rhetoric. This isn't really content. Vaush, they forced me to leave. I didn't back down, just to make it clear. Oh, I know that. I could see that. Sorry, I think maybe my webcam covered it up at the end there, but it was very clear from the way you turned around that somebody like ushered you away because you had you'd been speaking there for about 6 minutes. Yeah, but yes, good to clarify that. Remember when you debated that philosophy PhD and you called your idea of gender as postmodernism? What would you describe your prescriptions that? No, anyone who says that a self-ID model of gender is postmodernist doesn't know what either of those things mean. Postmodernism is like a broad, it can mean a lot of things, but broadly like a theory of or understanding of truth that is pluralistic, that there are multiple narratives, multiple truths that have to be engaged with and woven together to form a concrete understanding of the world.
Yeah, when he said postmodern, he meant the Jesuit tomfoolery, the Jesuit language games that comes out of universities these days, and that's exactly what you traffic in, Vaush. I understand that for a long time I've had some viewers who have wanted me to do a video on Vaush, and the reason I've held off of it is because I literally felt that I knew I would lose brain cells just listening to him. This is painful for me. You think the Whatever podcast stuff is bad? Just listening to this man and the way he argues kills me inside. But I still hope you enjoyed it at the very least. Anyway, that's my critique of the Redditor of Redditors. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share this video so more people see it, and Red Channels will catch you in the next one.